Just on that point about the executions, surely there's some evidence of Unionists, albeit maybe Irish Unionists, lobbying to prevent the executions, because Horace Plunkett, who is very well connected and very influential, attempted to prevent the executions. His closest friend was probably Harold Barber of Lisburn, from a prominent Unionist family. So there might well be evidence that well beyond the newspaper evidence of support for the executions, that in fact influential people were arguing in the Unionist, the broad Unionist community against executions. My other question would be, does Dr. O'Callaghan's study analyse what was going on in the labour and trade union movement in 1966? Because it's my recollection, in that year I was wearing a Connolly badge celebrating the 1916-1966 period, as it were, with a picture of a green and gold badge with Connolly on it. I also recall that the Northern Ireland Labour Party, which couldn't be described as a Republican organisation, was running a series of events on the life and times of James Connolly. So I think in 1916 in the North there was a certain maturity in which people thought 1916 was far enough back for an objective look at 1916, and Connolly was the easy way for the labour movement to attempt to look at that. I don't know who put the badges around, but I know within the labour and trade union movement there was something that wasn't Republican looking into 1916.
Time is not really on our side, but just a quick...
Sorry, I'm grossly oversimplified. In West Belfast, Republicans organised the kind of choreography of the march, but in the 60-page chapter on Belfast, I do describe the fact that it is a coalition of different kinds of groups. That, you know, it's Republicans who get it off the ground, but all kinds of other groups participate in it. You know, they don't necessarily buy the full Republican agenda. And outside Belfast, it's different groups altogether.
And of course,
so,
Jerry Fitt is a beneficiary of that, because he invited Roddy Connolly to unveil the plaque on the Connolly family home on the Falls Road, and a few months later won the West Belfast Westminster election for West Belfast on a Connollyite attendance platform, really. Fergal, that question about Unionists perhaps seeking to prevent the executions, have you found any evidence of that?
Well, one thing that surprised me was that on the ground in Dublin you find that opinion about the rebels from their enemies, and I'm thinking RIC policemen, but more obviously British soldiers, whether of Irish, Unionist or English nationality, is often it's surprisingly kind of it's not embittered, and there's often got a fair degree of respect for what the rebels have done. But I have to say, when you look at Unionist opinion as expressed sort of through newspapers, whether it's Southern Irish opinion in the Irish Times or Northern Irish Unionist opinion, Ulster opinion, it does tend to be quite harsh, you know, and there is a sort of sense of we've been stabbed in the back and we really must get our pound of flesh back and so on. And I think there's a kind of an interesting context to this, which is that a lot of people in Southern Ireland and in English opinion are very angry at Ulster Unionists for the Easter Rising. And they believe that, okay, Birrell's to blame for being a little bit lax, but fundamentally the problem is the radicalisation of Ireland that was caused by loyalism and by Ulster Unionism, and that 1916 in some respects is these chickens coming home to roost. And there's quite a lot of sort of people who you'd kind of describe as maybe just English liberals or, you know, middle of the road kind of people, and some Southern Unionists, and they're pretty hostile about Northern Unionism. And I wonder to what extent Northern Unionists were aware that people are looking at them and saying kind of, you're a big part of this problem.
And that's the background that Terence O'Neill was brought up in, you know, the grandchild of the liberal Marquis of Crewe, one of Asquith's Home Rule cabinet. His father had been killed, the first MP to be killed in the First World War, but O'Neill as a child and an adolescent was brought up in that liberal atmosphere with Asquith to tea every week, constantly excoriating the UVF and Carson's army from that period. But it's worth saying, of course, that Horace Plunkett, whom you mentioned, was after 1900 a liberal home ruler himself. While he had Unionist business contacts in the North, he was not anti-home rule in the second phase of his public career.